Now that I have all my little sketches finished, I went ahead and scanned these into my computer, and I'm going to drop them into a little template frame that I've made. So once I have all of my drawings added to my little templates here, and then finally I'm going to print my little boxes out on some watercolor paper so I can add some color and ink and final details before I cut these out and include them on my final gallery page. For my Toby inspired study, I will be using Winsor & Newton watercolor paints, micron pens, and some black acrylic ink. Now, always make sure that you use waterproof ink if you're going to be combining them with watercolor. I do believe that I learned this the hard way at some point. But anyway, I am going to try to recreate Toby's process as close as I can by dropping in some color using a wet into wet technique. I'm going to stick to his signature palette of cool blues and violets, and once I've laid in the background color, I'm going to let this dry, and then I'll finish it with the line work using black ink. For Naoko Takeuchi, I will also be using ink and watercolors. Takeuchi works in very soft, flowy values, and it looks to me like she likes to use some white ink or paint on top to create highlights and add these little glowy pops of light. It gives her work this really ethereal look, which I really adore. You know, drawing Sailor Moon style again, it just really gives me this warm, nostalgic feeling that I haven't felt in so long. I hope that you guys can get this feeling from your own inspirations and use this as part of your healing process. I want you guys to embrace your inner child and remember what it felt like to create art before ever caring if someone would like it, before you had to make sure it was good enough to share on social media. When you created something just for the sake of creating, to make something just for yourself. It's really amazing to me how this exercise is really bringing that feeling back to me. I really need to figure out how to bottle this feeling for later. So I must admit that painting like Conrad Rosette might be the one I'm most excited to try today. I tend to be a little bit of a control freak about painting, so just dropping in pigment and letting it do its thing both terrifies me and makes me super excited. So like the first two pieces, I'm sticking to watercolor for this one. And I'm actually starting to wonder why my primary medium is acrylic paint, considering all my inspiration artists seem to work in watercolor. Well, there you go. I'm learning something about myself here today. If you've never tried doing abstract watercolor painting by just dropping in color into water, I highly recommend it. It's very therapeutic and relaxing. You just don't really know what's going to happen, and it's just going to go where it wants, which is a really great way to give up some of that control that we always try to have when we're making art. Okay, so I've got quite a lot of water on here now, so I'm going to set this one aside for a little while and let my first layer dry. Now I'm going to finish this one up with a few pops of saturated color, like so. Oh, that is so satisfying. I'm seriously considering stealing this process. It takes a little bit of confidence to just do it, but the results are pretty awesome. Caroline Smith is back up next, and now I'll have to rein in my free-flowing watercolor tactics and convert to a more graphic, flat, and even painting style. Now, I wasn't able to confirm what medium Smith uses. It might actually be gouache, which was very popular for this type of style. It's a great medium for saturated graphic style illustration. And I think I have some gouache around here somewhere, but it's probably pretty old and I have limited colors. So instead, I'm going to stick to watercolor and just apply several layers to build up the saturation. I also have some Prisma markers to add some bright color pops. I really love the color palettes that Smith uses in her work. If you haven't figured it out already, I kind of love bright colors and rainbows. They just make me happy. For this piece though, I want to keep my palettes kind of consistent, and I'm going to stick to pinks and purples with a bright orange as an accent color. Okay, now it's time to get some color on my Disney-inspired piece. So, fun factoid for you, as many of you probably know, animation used to be done on something called cells, short for celluloid. It was a transparent sheet on which objects were drawn or painted for traditional hand-drawn animation. The outline of the image was usually drawn on the front of the cell, while the colors were painted on the back to eliminate brush strokes. This process was invented in 1914, and Disney Studios stopped using cells in 1990 when computer animation replaced this animation process. Now, if I was crazy, and that might be debatable, I could actually track down some celluloid and try this old school technique, but for this exercise, I'm gonna use the modern method and finish this piece digitally using Photoshop. I'm gonna start out with some colored outlines to emulate the look of the animated characters, and then I'll do some simple selections and fills to complete the color process. And now, at long last, we arrive at the final style study. Finally, this was kind of like a marathon of art making today. So hopefully I can still remember how to paint in my own style. Really though, this has been a brain challenge to keep changing gears and techniques. I really feel like I've learned a lot. This was all a bit experimental, and I honestly can't think of a better way to pull yourself out of artist block or simply keep yourself from getting stuck in a proverbial artist rut. I know I sometimes look at something I've drawn and I suddenly realize, like, okay, I've totally done that before. This is kind of a nice way to refresh your ideas and your drawing style. For this last piece, I will be painting in my main medium of choice, acrylic paint. I usually paint on smooth gessoed hardboard, but for this, I'm going to paint on thick watercolor paper. So a few final thoughts for you guys as we finish our final study. I hope that you've discovered something about yourself today by returning to the source and retracing your artistic lineage. When you finish this last study in your own style, take a moment to reflect upon it. Can you see any of your influences within it? Which was your favorite study to do? Would you try anything different next time? What I found the most interesting about this exercise is that my personal style seems to fall almost smack in the middle of these styles. Seeing them side by side like this, I can see that while my anime and animation influences are still very strong, I've also moved toward more realistic proportions and rendering. I have a really strong love of abstract and organic shapes, but I'm also really drawn to geometrics and graphic design. Something I would really like more of, though, is definitely a little more of Toby and Rosette. I may experiment with that on a future piece. Maybe consider these things for yourself, too. Which artist did you end up being most similar to, and which artist would you like to be more like? Just a few more final touches on my mini painting here, and then it'll be time for our Inspiration Gallery's grand opening. Okay, you guys, well, my style challenge is almost finished now, and before I show you how it turned out with all of them together, I just want to encourage all of you to try this. This was a really, really fun and challenging assignment. I learned so much about myself as an artist and the techniques of other artists that it was just, I don't know, I feel like we should do this every couple of years just to refresh our own styles. At first, I was a little bit intimidated, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. But the more that I got into it, like, the more relaxing it sort of became. Like, remember when you were a kid and you're just like, oh, I'm going to draw Disney, or I'm just going to copy my favorite artists or comic book characters or whatever, and you just didn't worry so much about, oh my God, is this going to be unique? Is this going to be accepted by people? Is this going to get likes on Instagram? Are people going to accuse me of copying? Like, all of that just goes away. And it was really, really nice to just return to that. Like, I was drawing Sailor Moon. I had Sailor Moon in the background, and I felt like I was 13 again. And it was just really great. So I encourage all of you who are having artist block or worrying about who you are as an artist or where your inspirations come from to do this. It's just really, really a good assignment. I think they should do this in school, actually. We did not have this in school, and I think it's great. I think I might incorporate it into my class as well. So thank you guys for watching. I hope this helped you. I hope this got you jazzed to do some style experiments, and I hope to see you on another episode very soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.